Yep.
Going now.
Kia ora koutou, and thank you for joining us today to talk about employee commuting, why it's important, and how you can capitalise on some changes that have occurred in the last 3 to 6 months. Today's presenters are myself, Anne-Marie, and my colleagues Benjamin and Tracy will also be presenting today and answering any questions you might have. We're all in the People and Places team here at Abley, where we work to support and encourage active and sustainable travel. So some housekeeping to start. The webinar will run for around 30 minutes, including questions, and we'll make time for that at the end. We'll record the webinar and email you a link to the recording so you can refer back to it in the future. And please do send us any questions you have. There's a Q&A tool there. You just type your question into the box at any stage of the webinar and we'll do our best to answer them within the time limit that we have. There is a lag, so please ask questions as early as you can so we can see them. And if you see a question in the Q&A box that you would like answered, then please like it so we can prioritise answering it if we can. And any questions we don't have time for, we'll answer in writing and send out to everyone along with the webinar recording and a copy of the presentation. Okay, so employee commuting. Why is this important? And why is it important now after the COVID lockdown? So it's important for two main reasons. The first one is environmental drivers. In New Zealand, transport generates about 1/5 of carbon emissions, and it's still growing. In office-based workplaces, travel is often the top source of carbon emissions. The COVID lockdown interrupted people's travel patterns, so they may not be as ingrained as they were, and they have experienced the benefits of fewer vehicles on the road and what that feels like. You might have seen there's an article in Stuff this morning about that very topic. This means many organisations, maybe yourself, are in the process of changing remote working policies. So now is a good time to measure your post-COVID carbon footprint. Some other aspects is that many employees want to work for organisations with better environmental policies and sustainability. So company-wide commitments to this area help to attract and retain employees. Often employees are concerned about climate change and not sure how they can contribute. So changing how they travel is one way that they can do that. And measuring and understanding your carbon footprint as a company is also becoming more important and is now often a prerequisite to working for some clients. And a question that we always get, can't electric vehicles save us? Well, new electric vehicle sales are not moving fast enough to meet our climate change responsibilities, and that is to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050 under the recent Climate Change Amendment Act. Plus, electric vehicles don't give us the other social and well-being benefits that I'll talk about next. So, moving on, the second important reason for the health and well-being of your staff. So nearly half of adults are not getting the recommended level of physical activity each week in New Zealand, and that level is 2.5 hours of physical activity each week. Half an hour, 5 days a week. It's not much. Physically active people are at a lower risk of developing heart and lung conditions, stroke, weight issues, type 2 diabetes, and some cancers. And physical activity can also increase mental well-being by reducing stress, depression, anxiety, and dementia. So walking and cycling and using public transport, what we call active travel, to get to work, are a relatively easy way to be physically active. Rather than adding on physical activity to people's daily lives, we're just integrating them into those lives. And studies have shown that people who increase their physical activity by half an hour a day take fewer sick days. Very recent surveys have also shown that in the lockdown, people were as productive or more productive when working from home. So what can you do about it? Well, we've given you an easy process. The first thing is to understand your employees and how they travel. The second is to check you've got the right policies and the right facilities in your workplaces to encourage and support people who travel not using a car. And then you can start making changes to support sustainable and healthy travel. And you can go on to quantify those carbon emissions and set goals to reduce them. I'll now pass over to Benjamin, who's going to talk about the travel surveys, which are an important part of understanding your employees and how they travel.
Yep. Hi, everyone. My name is Benjamin. My background is in helping organizations develop travel surveys. I did that in the UK, and then implementing follow-on actions to help make their staff be more sustainable in how they commute, but also healthier, as Anne-Marie just mentioned. So surveys are harder than they seem. We need to get the right data from a survey to make sure that we have actionable insights. So I'm going to talk about how we did a survey for ourselves and give you a bit of an idea of the outputs that you can expect from an employee travel surveys, and then that you can also action. We want to know how employees travel to, how they travel to the office and back from the office, how often, what are the reasons and what are the constraints as well. So for example, if people have kids, then there might be a reason why they drive. So we want to know about that. One of the common mistakes that people do when they are trying to do travel surveys is that they ask for the main mode. We ask for travel on a typical week. So we get a granular understanding of how people travel day by day within a week. And that shows us that some people might take a bus one day, drive another day, cycle another day. So it's quite important to have this more comprehensive view of what's happening. And finally, one thing to consider is the response rate. You want to have enough employees fill out your travel survey because you want meaningful data. So now I'm going to get into our example. So from our survey that we did at Abley. We did that survey before, during the lockdown, but about a typical week before the lockdown. So that's a snapshot of commuting in our organization in a typical week. So you can see that we are quite sustainable. We have a lot of cycling, a lot of walking, a lot of public transport. So we can say we're doing pretty well in this area. But then we also need to get a bit more granular in terms of the information and in terms of the insights. So I'm going to move to the day-by-day comparison now. So this is for our Auckland office. You can see people might not have the same habits every day. Some people might do, but in our office, at least in the Auckland office, there's quite a few people who change what they do day by day. And you can see the purple color here is the working from home. This was still pretty low before lockdown, but I'd imagine it's pretty high up now. So you can assess this change, and you could say, well, Friday is obviously a day that people like to work from home, so maybe our working from home policy can integrate that. So that's the sort of insight you could get from this output. You can also do year by year. So we've done that because we've been able to do surveys year on year with consistent methodology so that we can compare. And you can see that, so this is for our Christchurch office this time. You can see that walking in blue has increased from 3% to 16.6% in just 3 years. So this is quite a massive increase in walking. Part of the reason is because we moved offices in May 2017 to a more central location. So this is the sort of output that we get. We can measure the impact that this office move had, but also we can see that there has been a reduction between 2018 and 2020. So that's probably due to the good work we've done in terms of encouraging people to be more sustainable in their commutes. So the sorts of things you can draw from an insight like that is, for example, if car use has reduced, and it has a bit for ourselves, then you can wonder, do we still need to have as many car parking spaces, and can we save that money and invest it in something else? So it's the sorts of insights you want to look at when thinking about your action plan, when thinking about what to do to support employees. Now, one thing that we've done this year that is quite helpful is categorizing employees. So we are trying to understand which potential they have to become more sustainable and also to become more active from a well-being point of view. So you can see several categories. This category is mostly people who just drive alone or car sharing. These people do a bit of everything, multimodal, so they could drive one day and cycle another day and take public transport another day. Sustainable is just public transport and active travel, and active is just walking and cycling. So here, this tells you how much potential you have to improve commuting in your organization. So the active people, this is the gold standard. That's what we want to achieve. So these people, you just want to make sure they have a comfortable walking and cycling experience. Whereas if you look at the multimodal, these people are aware of their travel options. They can change from one to another during a week, but we can try and push them more towards the sustainable and active. And it's important to bear in mind here that you'll rarely manage to get someone to ditch their car and cycle all the time. However, it's quite possible that you'll manage to get people to be sustainable more of the time. So coming back to that graph of the day-by-day comparison, getting many people to cycle one more day per week is very impactful. And finally, I'm going to wrap up the survey part on the carbon emissions. I'm sure some of you are aware that environmental reporting has become very important recently. Many organizations are trying to get accreditation through TOI2, for example. And to achieve this, you need to report on your emissions. So carbon emissions for employee commuting is part of that. They are part of Scope 3. Historically, Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions have been quite easy to measure because these are directly related to consumption of, for example, building energy or vehicle fuel. Scope 3 are harder to measure up to now, and businesses are now looking at getting better at measuring these things. So that's where it comes in. And this figure, the 19 tons of CO2 equivalent, this is for Abley. So this is what commuting represents in a year at Abley for all staff. It's not including business travel, I'm just specifying. This is roughly equivalent to 44.5 barrels of oil, just for comparison, or 318 tree seedlings grown for 10 years, just to have an idea of what that represents. So now I'm just going to pass on to Tracy. She's going to talk about the audits and the action plan that link through from the insights we get in the travel survey.
Great, thanks, Benjamin. Kia ora koutou. As Benjamin says, I'm just going to take you through some of the other applications that are included in the package that we could offer you. So one of the first things is the auditing of your existing facilities. So that's looking at whether you've got cycle parking, whether you've got enough cycle parking, and the type of cycle parking. So on the left hand side there on the photograph, you've got, this is Auckland Transport's biking facility. There is a drying room in there. There's charging points for electric bikes, there's lockers, there's all different kinds of stands. Often, and I've specifically picked a photograph next to that that's not in New Zealand, but you've probably seen them. We call them wheel benders, and they are the kind of cycle stand that don't actually get used well. So it's what kind of facilities you've got and what you actually want to upgrade to. Things that, you know, if you've got fleet vehicles, we have one pool vehicle in our company, so how you've got what provision you've got for those and what kind of vehicles you use. So we've got a hybrid vehicle in our organisation. We've also got a couple of pool bikes, so it's looking at those kind of things of what you've got for that, what kind of sharing facilities, how many you've got, things like provision of umbrellas for the wet weather, which certainly down here in Christchurch today it's rather wet, so rather useful for when you're going out for business meetings. And some companies offer other extra facilities such as towel free towels and towel cleaning. So it's actually just looking at what you already have in the organisation, and if you don't have some of these, they become actions. In terms of organisational policies, that's another area that we look at. So it's looking at whether you already have a travel plan or travel initiatives. So on the left-hand side there of your screen, you've got an app that could actually help people with their personalised travel planning. So it's telling them how they can get from home, the different options, whether you're walking, cycling, using a bus or driving into work, and looking at the costs, etc. So it's just giving people the easiest access to things. That one can be an internet-based option or on a phone as well, the phone app. So that's great. Other things that you can do are guaranteed rides home. So that is just sort of the photograph is accessing a taxi service. So if you've cycled in or you've caught a bus, you have to get home for children or family matters, or you're sick, you can then actually get a taxi home, which the company will pay for. The other thing, obviously, post-COVID, that Anne-Marie's also already mentioned, working from home. That's something that's definitely going to be a way that we can reduce some of the travel impacts, and people actually just prefer it just because it's actually more it's more sensible, and you get focused at times. So it's whether you have a working from home policy, whether that needs updating. At Abley, we've just launched a new flexible working program this week, in fact. So we're just reacting to the COVID-19 situation. Other thing is business travel. Depending on the size and needs of your organisation, you may need to travel between cities in New Zealand and overseas. Some of the travel you can manage within the town centres, so it's just what you currently do and what can be done to improve that. So, and that ties directly back into the carbon emissions, particularly with business travel. So in terms of some of the possible actions that could result from this process, we have, the first and foremost, that's a picture of me, and I don't really like showing pictures of me, but there you go. You've got to use your people. Your people are your best resource, and they know what you need and what they can offer. So I'm a mum of two young children, as are many people in our organisation, and bike to work. So it's, when new people come in, you can provide advice on the different routes people can use. So it's just using that knowledge that's already in the company. Providing cycle facilities for visitors as well, and providing information about that. So that second photo is at a doctor's surgery. My local doctor's surgery suggested that would be a good idea, and every time I go, those cycle stands are full. So there's definitely a requirement for that, depending on your organisation. The other critical thing is, if you're in a building where you don't own the building and there are other businesses occupying the space, working together as organisations can be a really good way to achieve good outcomes for certainly things like showers and cycle facilities. So yeah, just thinking about working together when you're in a multi-use building. And the one of the final things is shower facilities. Who would not want to shower in that particular showering facility? It's lovely. I've seen some lovely showering facilities and some not, but the process would be that you can just look at what you need and whether it's additional showers on each floor. In terms of parking, we also look at the wide range of users. So you've got people starting to use their own private electric scooters to travel to and from work, and they obviously need charging within the day. Electric bikes are becoming so much more common across the country. We have several e-bike users within our organisation as well, so it's providing those charging points and the cycle parking for them to be provided for. Things like parking management, so we have an internal program called Parking Whiz, which manages our spaces, and you have coupons and you can book a space. So it depends entirely on your company. You may already have something, or you may want to implement something like that just to better manage the car parking. And electric vehicles, as Anne-Marie mentioned, the uptake isn't as popular as it could be at the moment, but certainly providing infrastructure that can support that is critical as we go forward. And now I'd like to pass back to Anne-Marie just to summarise the health check process.
Thanks, Tracy. I'll just go there. So, so to help you, we've developed a workplace travel health check. This is so it can maybe start you on this journey if you haven't started yet, or perhaps you've fallen off on the way, or it's just got too hard, or you don't have time. So the check would include an employee travel survey, and we're in a really good situation now because we can survey pre and post COVID travel patterns, so we can sort of see what effect that has had, or what effect the lockdown has had. We'd also probably do a pulse survey 6 or 12 months after to see how things are tracking, see progress, or if you need to make any tweaks. Then we do the audit of policies and facilities like Tracy spoke about. So having a look at what you've got, what the gaps are, what's missing, maybe what's not quite up to standard, and how we can help you to get those better. And then provide you a brief report outlining the results, some insights, recommendations, next steps, sort of giving you a path so that you know what you need to do next. So if you'd like to know more about this check, then get in touch with me or Benjamin or Tracy. Okay. So just moving on, I see we've got some good questions that have come in today, so thanks for that. We'll go through them now. So some questions a question for Benjamin. What is a sufficient response rate in a travel survey, and how do we ensure it's reached?
Yeah, so that would depend on the size of the organization, obviously, but you would have to have a minimum. So we got a response rate of 65%. We are a company of 69 staff, so that's decent. You can have representative data with that. I would say if you are less than, well, basically you need at least 40 or 50 answers in absolute numbers, and then if the company is bigger than that, try and aim for 50%. Obviously, if your workplace is 5,000 employees, you're not going to get 50%, but you just have to have this representativity. So yeah, 40 or 50 people is a minimum to get good data, and then try and push it, which requires a lot of internal communications.
Okay, thanks, Benjamin. Another question about the surveys. How did you complete the survey? Was it online or in person?
Yeah, that was online. So we have offices in Christchurch and Auckland and people elsewhere in the country, so that's the easiest. And also it's the best because people can fit it into their routine. It just takes them. Our survey took 5 minutes for people to complete on average, which is probably one of the reasons why we have a good response rate. And so yeah, we did it through SurveyMonkey with a professional account, and then we analyzed the results from that. Okay.
Thanks, Benjamin. So there's a question about how business travel fits into this, and we've talked about that a little bit, but Benjamin, do you just want to cover that off?
Yep, we'll quickly do this one. So business travel is often collected through other means. So you might get reports from Uber for Business if you use that, or you might get Flight Center or Orbit for air travel. So you have reports from elsewhere in the company or from your the company you leased your cars from. So you have that information. So it's nice to keep commuting and business travel separate so that it doesn't confuse respondents.
Great. Okay, some questions from Tracy's part. So we have limited space, but we need more space for bikes. What can I do to overcome the challenges?
Yeah, so there's several things that you can do. Often there's a few little pockets of spaces in car parks that you can provide additional cycle parking in, or you can actually look at, depending on whether you own all the space that you've got for parking, you can, or within your space, you can actually look at repurposing a parking space. So whether it's a space that was previously provided for staff parking or a fleet vehicle, if you find through this process you don't need as many fleet vehicles, for example, you can take some of that space up. And that's certainly something we did within our organisation. So we had to expand our bike cage to the limits of the car park now, to the space that we've got. So it very much depends on your space, but there's always something that generally can be done.
Thanks, Tracy. And another one for you, Tracy. We lease our offices, so we don't have control over what we can provide by way of facilities for staff. What would you recommend we do?
So there's a few ways that we could deal with this. It depends on your relationship with your landlord, and you can actually sort of have a round table and sit down with them and see what you can do directly with the landlord. If there's a more challenging relationship with a landlord, which has been the case in some instances with companies I've worked with in the past, you can actually build up that process by working with other companies within your building so that you're all working together. So it's not just one company that's requesting cycle parking or showers, it's actually coming from the whole of the building, so that it's actually more beneficial for the landlord to do something. It can be tailored to each organisation, but yeah, so it's either direct or working with others.
Okay, thanks, Tracy. And another question asking how much the workplace travel health check costs. So I'll take that one. So the travel health check is a relatively simple process. It's not going to cost a lot, but the cost depends on obviously how many staff you have and how many work sites there are. So, and also what other needs you might have. So if you want to include business travel and things like that. So best to come in to contact us and we can give you those costs. Okay, so thanks for those questions. That was great. And thanks to Benjamin and Tracy for your presentations and also for answering the questions. If you would like any further information about what we talked about today or any other transport related question, then please get in touch. We're very keen to talk to you, and our contact details are shown on the slide. So just feel free to get in touch. And myself and Tracy are based in Christchurch and Benjamin's based in Auckland, but we do work around the country. So thank you again and enjoy the rest of your day.